So a very good afternoon to all of you, both the beds of online and the audio. You know, today we are going to discuss one of the very important tools, or we can say one is you can use as a tool. Also, you can use as a you can say that as a concept of understanding sustainability in a very precise way. That is landscape ecology, and I put another word ecological civilization to have a conclusion or a broader discussion on this issue. Right. So I will start with this session. Okay. So now we have reached to block 3 of course 1 MSD 011 systematic science. Block 3, we are looking into what are the various approaches which we need to follow, and we are going to look into some of the basic approaches to achieve sustainable development, which is one of the core objective of sustainable science, right? So in the previous session, we have looked into the that's watershed management and sustainable development. How to look watershed management is a tool to sustain natural resource management. When we discuss about the sustainability, as I told you, that understanding sustainability needs to understand from a landscape perspective. You see here in front of you, this is a beautiful photos of that Harkidun Valley. But it is not exactly Harkidun Valley. In the right side of the Harkidun, this is near Winsara Lake. When you see this beautiful landscape, you see as a scenery. The meaning of these particular photos reflect, the meaning of understanding landscape ecology. No, it is not about your geographical or then beauty of your eyes. This also talks about the interlinkages from your that glaciers up to this river. That is how we have to understand sustainability, right? This also reflected, when you have, you want to have a full growth that forest or healthy forest. What do you need? We need water from the glaciers. Glacier melted and the glacier formation takes place in the same time. Different slope and that angles they have different variety of, you will see variety of plants, variety of animals that match the health of the ecosystem. This is how we have to understand the landscape ecology in particular. Then we'll coming towards how to bring this principle of landscape ecology in the context of sustainability in this understanding that the principle of sustainability science, right? So here I'm also putting some of the, I more focus on northern India, northeast India. You will see this landscape. When we see all this landscape, we use the word wow. How beautiful is this scenery? Okay, very refreshing. What exactly it means, right? And if you closely look into as a student of sustainability science, what you will see? We'll see when you have understanding about the needs for the nature society interaction, you will easily link the different components of this landscape you have shown in front of you. That is exactly what we have to understand the landscape ecology, what you have to understand a way towards the or towards achieving sustainability in particular, right? So, what is landscape? What we have seen is landscape, as you know, in different. What I have seen here, what we have seen in these are the heterogeneous land area that is often hierarchically structured. That is the structure of the landscape. You will see even in the backdrop of this slide. Also, you will see this is the landscape what I have where I have taken from the flight my way to that Madras, Chennai, 10 years back, right? This is near the sea, right? Then, if you look into how landscape, as I told you, landscape it's when we look that structure, every structure has a function. So from you look from that functional point of view, we'll see all those landscaping components, they have an open system. All these open system are linked with matter, energy, resources, organism that flows across landscape boundaries and in interaction with other landscape. That's exactly what I mean. That is the process or landscape function. So when you are trying to understand the concept of sustainability or any a process you are trying to implement or trying to develop for any issues to make it in a sustainable way or to make an inclusive development, we have to understand this fundamental principle of nature as we define in as a landscape ecology or right. For example, we know, as I told you, nutrients are flowing from from upstream hill up to the end of the that river through different ecosystem, through different landscape structure, and it reaches up to the ocean. Right? It again come right in the natural cycle. So then hydrological flows, aquatic system. These are some of the examples which you can understand uh, the system, a different system, where all the system cannot look differently. That they have a interaction or linkages through a function, through the processes. It is not the question of your landscape, it is question of different system, especially in socio-ecological system. So if we look into that, both landscape structure, what we have seen, and landscape function, they change over time, right? Because of what? Because of one is natural processes, and the other is what? The other is that human interference, right? So because of that landscape structure is sense, when you sense the structure of the landscape, what we have shown in front of it, for example, in the behind this backdrop of this PPT also, you will see this is the banana plantation over there in South India and somewhere in Cochin. This is photos taken by me. You see, when you change this part of the lane, this particular, say that it is surrounded by the banana, right? Banana plant. Then in between there is some cultivated. So when you sense it, then this landscape structure changes again. Then because of that, function is also changes, right? So it can be looked into different scale. It depends on it may be natural, it may be human interference. It depends on the instruction and function changes. The dynamic changes in instruction functions depends on its frequency and its magnitude. Like in the same way, when we look into socio-ecological study, nature-society interaction also that can be directly applicable when we are trying to understand that socio-ecological structures. So I assume that most of us we have learned into the study material, but for a quick look into that, there are 12 principles, right, under 4 category. Uh, that is proposed by Forman 1995 when we're trying to understand the landscape landscape ecology. Under the category of landscape and region, the major and that principle one is landscape and region. Every region have different landscape. If you look into northeastern India, you will see different landscape structure, and region-wise also we have different landscape structure. In the this coastal area, they have different landscape structure in that way. The patch corridor matrix is also one of the principles. Where in patch corridor matrix, the arrangement structural pattern of patches, corridor, and a matrix that constitute a landscape that we have seen. So I will not go into tell all those things. The name itself given that reflects the meaning of that. So when it talks about the patches in the corridor, that's natural vegetation patch, large natural vegetation patches we have seen. Then different safe as a patch safes also you will find out. Then different ecosystem in a large landscape, the interaction happen. Then you will see population is dynamically changing in and floral and that botanical means floral population is also changing, and that faunal population also changing. At the same time, when we talk of the mosaic, we'll see grain size, then how it changes. That here we can talk about the frequency of changes and the magnitude of changes, magnitude of changes that gives different shapes. So the last category, let's talk about application. This is one of the important where when we are landscaping, when human try to make something, I mean, structure in a different it's a beautiful way, or what we can say, we're trying to uh, structure a place or design a landscape. So we try to follow a natural, available natural principle. That's exactly, for example, when we are trying to landscaping a particular area, or we're trying to make a for one of the example I want to say, give you one example is this Indira Gandhi National Open University headquarters. In the beginning it was a barren land. Now because of the better landscaping approach follow, when in during the last 25 to 30 years, this barren land become a very beautiful lush green area as compared to that was in 1980s. This is how we follow the principle, the natural principle of landscape ecology, right? This is where we are talking about that application. This is one of the examples. So I will not go in details. Then coming into the theory, different theories are there in this landscape ecology. And if you look into 1980s, when different then expert academics in the field of landscape ecology, they were thinking, their thinking was in different way. But in the same time, when it is growing from the 1980s onward, they have looked into the natural phenomenon in different way, where landscape are interacting and different components are interacting. Some few of that landscape that theory are hierarchy theory. Then second is fractal geometry and percolation theory and self-organization criticality. When you talk about hierarchical theory, the hierarchy term is defined as a system of interconnection wherein the higher level of constraints to lower levels to various degrees depending on time of constraints or the behavior, right? So for example, here, if you look into ecological hierarchy, cells, different cells, macroorganisms, there are different then organisms, then comes to population, comes to communities, regional biotas, global biosphere. This is one example. And for example, when you study a river, also you will find different in the first, lower that category you will find when if you are from a geographer or geologist, you will understand this easily, that when you are trying to study the river morphology or river characteristic, you will find out that can be categorized in different way, that are interlinkages in hierarchical way. First, we will find drain, then different drain map in different drain category, drain 1, drain 2, drain 3, drain 4, then that map stream and 2 stream or 3 stream max river. In that way, there are hierarchy. So, if you look from ecological point of view, ecological organization, if you look, then what we have seen in front of us, like from like in any of the food chain system, any of the social structure, you will find out their pattern is developed in a hierarchical structure. This is also available in study material, how we can see this hierarchical, ecological hierarchy, is we know that when there is change in structure, there is change in function also. How can we look into the frequency in distribution? This bottom line, when it looks into into the timeline, when your frequency is the activities happening in that landscape is the frequency, and the magnitude is the frequency is higher frequency is there, then you will be able to see the changes immediately, right? For example, see an example of the Sharon that urbanization pattern over here we have seen because of human interference. You will be able to see easily, okay, it is happening, changing is happening. Due to that development activities, you will see, okay, there is, that decline in groundwater level. This is one of the impact, right? And then the second, the two, here, uh, you cannot easily identify it, but no, you will be able to understand in 5 years or 2 years, 3 years duration, right? So there are certain activities that happening in that ecological hierarchy that you will see. But in case of three, no, uh, it is very difficult to understand because, for example, some of the phenomenon you are not able to understand, like, because of the change in function and the change of your structure in that ecosystem, extinction of species, we are not easily understand, right? It takes a lot of time to understand that. So this is one of the example how we have to understand that. The important concept in the hierarchy theory is that we have know these three levels. We have seen that uh, this variable, the different variables, example which I have also given example, when earthquake is happening, then when there is earthquake happening or landslide happening, suddenly you will see the changes suddenly. When urbanization is happening, you can see sudden changes. So these three scales that we can understand, we have to understand this principle when we are trying to develop such kind of that inclusive development model, sustainable development model, and so on, right? Then fractal geometry. Uh, in case of fractal geometry, this is also natural principle. Uh, this is the kind of classes of pattern that remains similar or repeats over a wider range of scale. When we look into different scales, you will find out that the assumption of this fractal theory are satisfied. If this assumption is satisfied, that extrapolation of spatial pattern across scales becomes possible, allowing that broad scale patterns to be predicted from the sign that from a fine scale measurement. So an early application of this fractal geometry for landscape study was the use of the fractal dimension as an index of human interference in landscape pattern, because we randomly take some area and we develop those area. For example, we cut the forest and develop that we do agricultural activities, or we started urbanization or development activities over there. Other applications include insect movements, measures of landscape texture, species perception of landscape structure, generation of artificial that landscape, characterizing landscape pattern using fractal theory for landscape design. Right, this is how we will see. Then the third one is percolation theory, which is proposed by Stoffer and Aharoni 1992, that deals with special pattern in randomly assembled system, right? So the application of this percolation theory to landscape studies that addresses a series of questions dealing with the size of that shape and connectivities of different habitat is a function of the percentage of landscape occupied by that habitat, right? Because when we talk about percolation theory, this percolation theory generates pattern in the actions of specific processes. Then, so the comparison of random maps at that particular actual site, actual place of landscape, it provides a neutral model capable of defining significant departure from the randomness of pattern landscape. So this theory has offered important insight into nature of connectivity on landscape. Means when there is, if you see in this percolation theory, for example, if there is missing linkages, there may be missing linkages, but in function, whatever we observe in those in front of the visual observation, it is not exactly not that. So in that, especially, it comes into the function. Function always goes behind that, right? Then self-organized critical theory. In that, this states that open complex system may be described by power law statistic over many order of magnitude, because all the systems are self-similar. you look into that forest, you look into pond ecosystem, many system they have they are self-similar, and a fundamental understanding of scale dependent phenomena that can emerge from study of self-organized criticality. So well study example of physical system that display the properties of self-organized criticality that includes avalanches and sand dunes, earthquake, and a ferromagnetic system. So you can see that one example is also in canopy gaps in rainforest, river flows, and coevolution in multi-species. This is self-organized, means to survive themselves, they evolve, right? What are the factors affecting the changes of landscape diversity? As I told you, when we talk about the forest, when we talk about any of the ecosystem, agricultural intensification is one of the factor. Then the other is agricultural abandonment. For example, in case of zooming cultivation, shifting cultivation in different part of the mountain area, especially northeast Himalaya and that Himalayan region, you will find on abandonment of forest that is also affecting that landscape diversity. Then fire, and fire when natural, it may be natural fire, it may be forest fire. In case of forest fires, it may be natural fire or man-made fire. When it happen, that affect to the landscape diversity of that area. Deforestation, we know that livestock grazing. Then especially the most important when we talk about the sustainability point of view is infrastructure development. So that's why here we need to understand that basic principle we have talked to, about hierarchy model, percolation theory. When you implement any of the infrastructure development program or policy, right? I will not go into this. So this shows that we know that structure and function of landscape are closely related. And so when we are talking about management of natural resources, it may be, and when you look into the very complex issue, here we have to understand the principle of landscape ecology, because when we talk about natural resource management, it is not about structure of your landscape, it is about the function. Here we have to look back that landscape ecology, human as a part of landscape ecology. So the main goal of landscape ecology is to understand the causes and ecological consequences of spatial heterogeneity across landscape and find ways and means of its sustainable. But as I told you, when we are trying to develop new infrastructure development, we try to avoid some of the uh, we try to have a minimum disturbance to the natural the structure, in the sense that we have to utilize natural resources, right? So that landscape ecology can be looked into different way. It is very important to understand that, especially when we try to tie landscape structure to multi-scale management, because when you look into any of these issues of the sustainability, no, it is not a, sectoral approach. They are closely related. Its component, its sector are closely related. So for example, today when we talk about watershed management, it's not about the question of your enhancing soil fertility. It's not about a decree to implement or to follow that soil erosion practice. It is about the improvement of the holistic that watershed, that the function of the watershed means health of the that watershed. So this, when we are trying to understand the watershed management, in case of watershed management, we have to understand from the structure landscape ecology point of view. So as we know that one component to another component, landscape function plays important management. When, for example, when you want to try to stop the erosion, that siltation of a river, then that needs to look into the upstream of that area. So that shows that landscape function have a coast boundary. When you are trying to look into that, there is a coast boundary management, right? That is very much important. Then As we know that we need to follow landscape sense with adaptive management. We need to use integrated management technique by incorporating multi-scale cross-boundary adaptive management to achieve sustainable landscape integrity. Essentially, we look into from the lens of sustainable science. As we know that sustainable science is the study of interaction between nature and society. So culture play an important role. It is the culture that maintain the sustainability of the natural resources. It is the culture that ruin the system. So culture plays important role, right? So it is in that way, we have to uh, understand the culture of ecology or ecology of culture, right? So when we are trying to understand the landscape ecology, we will be able to understand what yesterday also, in the last session also, when we talk about that water set management, it is not a, it's a integrated management, right? So this landscape clause gives a space from single scale management to multi-scale management, from static management to the adaptive management, from isolated management to integrated management. This is the structure. Now, let us come into the real, the basic important area which we need to understand as a student of sustainability. How landscape ecology is very much important in studying the sustainability, right? That can be looked into sustainable landscape interaction, landscape sustainability science, theoretical foundation of landscape sustainability science, application of landscape sustainability science, right? When we're talking about the sustainability, is we are continuously discussing about these issues. It is about that nature-society interaction. That's why it's, when I have it, we discussed a few minutes back in a quick look into landscape ecology, right? In that, what we discussed was the conventional way of understanding the landscape in terms of structure and function. And we know that the issues of sustainability is because of the imbalance in nature society interaction, right? We know that the structure and the function of landscape gives the productivity of the land, productivity of resources. Those productivity of the resources is utilized by the human, right? And for what it was utilized? It was utilized because to meet our basic needs, right? When your basic needs, let us take in this way that when we are part of the landscape of an area, and very much when we talk about landscape ecology in 1980s and before that, when they study the landscape ecology, we look into the uh, other component. We human, we are not part of the. We do not consider it. We consider it, but we do not look human as a central part of that landscape ecology. Now, if you bring ourselves as a part of landscape pattern, then the resources flow from the natural environment as a human society as a component. This is also a function. This is also a structure. And the function of the humans, the responsibility of what we get from the natural environment, from the landscape structure, is basic human needs. So we have changed that basic human needs in different way. When we talk about this basic human needs, it is different from one region to another region. That's why when we study the landscape ecology or landscape structure, it is different from one region to another, and it can be looked into different scale. Say from the that micro, then meso, and macro level, from your local level to regional level, regional to national, national to then continental, then continental to global context. That's why today we are talking about just a sustainable planet, right? Then coming to these needs, when human civilization was in different stages, we know that basic needs are different from one that civilization to another civilization. Because of human advancement, human knowledge, our needs are increasing. Even today, also in the last 2 3 years only, that is this is one of the example of hierarchy theory. But speed is, I mean, speed is you are able to understand very easily. Take this example of sudden changes in the system of because of COVID-19. How our basic needs is changing, right? So our basic need was, for example, the ICT component was not, I mean, we are part of the basic needs, but if you look into generalized thing, okay, it was not part of education. Say an example, education system. This ICT of mobile, laptop, and they were not a part of the basic needs when we look into from a student point of view. Now it has become the basic need. So these needs can be, that is why we are talking about adaptive management, right? From static to adaptive management. That's why we have to understand. That's I told you, and our understanding is to understand the hierarchy of principle of theory of hierarchy, theory of landscape ecology, different theory of landscape ecology. When we try to understand issues of sustainability, right? Then I'm sure you have a, I mean, detailed discussion about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the previous session when Dr. Diksha was talking about it. In that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what was basic focus was on, that basic focus was on individual needs, family level. Now today, when we talk about sustainability, that needs to be, look into the different broader scale, right? That needs to look into organizational. That needs to ensure the wholesomeness for, I mean, for your community. So that's why 1973, from that point of view, Delhi proposed that hierarchy of needs called Delhi triangles, which was further refined by others. Here, why we need to basic needs? These basic needs are for human or human well-being, right? Here you see in this Delhi triangle, right? Uh, Here you will see the natural environment is the ultimate means. That's I talk about when we talk about the landscape function, landscape structure. What we give, we get at a function is our basic food, our basic needs from the landscape. That's why natural environment is the ultimate means. And how for getting what, for our well-being, right? For our happiness, for our harmony, for our fulfillment, for our self-realization, community, enlightenment. How we get it? To the intermediate means. To get what ultimate means, hence what we get through, I mean, the immediate means of economy, technology, politics, and ethics. So this is, what I want to say is that uh, this way of human needs is changing. We have to adapt it. In when we are trying to adapt all these things, we have to keep in our mind the principle of landscape ecology, right? So in that way, landscape ecology plays an important role in regional sustainability, and that can only be achieved by integrating context-based sustainability across, you know, different sector. For example, when you are talking about sustainability of your state, say an example of state of any small state, Sikkim, right? We need to understand and the sustainability of Sikkim. We have to understand their geographical location, their culture, like their structure of the society. Then only we will be able to develop an inclusive development and will be able to have a sustainable society. So where we need to bring those concepts of landscape ecology, right? And that is why when we talk about landscape ecology, we our major focus one was on natural resources. And here, when we look in from sustainability point of view, we are going to bring in a broader concept of that socio-ecological study. bringing society as a part of landscape. That's why it talks about a landscape sustainability science to understand that uh, broader context of modern socio-ecological study. So if you look into theoretical foundation of landscape sustainability science, its first foundation is sustainability science, as you know that sustainable science is the study of the interaction between nature and society. That's the basic foundation is to achieve or to bring back wherever possible a harmonious relation between nature and society. Then landscape ecology, as we talk, in landscape ecology, what we learn, and we summarize what we learn is it is about a structure, well-maintained structure with a function. This structure has a the function, flow of function terms of matters, flow of matters, inertia, and so on. Right? When suddenly if you take out any of the component from that landscape, what you will find out there is breakup in that function. Because of that, then sustainable landscape may have some impact. Right? Then the third is resilience theories. Nature has its own resilience capability. But because of our disturbance by the human civilization, then the resilient capacity was reduced or unable to resilience because of the degradation we are happening, because of disturbance we are putting in that natural system beyond their self-resilience. Then the fourth part is what we talk about hierarchy theory, the different system, how it's interacted. For example, see the simple way of understanding food chain system, food web system. Suddenly you have taken out one of this system, then suddenly some species may be collapsed. But it may not happen sometimes because the that species themselves to find an alternative, they try to adapt in the system, right? That's why we're talking about hierarchy and different theory, right? So I will not go into detail about landscape sustainability science. It is about talks about, as I told you, from the that ecological point of view to the broader context of socio-ecological context. That's exactly what landscape sustainability science is talking about. That when we talk about this landscape sustainability science, it talks about it. Then when you bring the society, you know when we talk to landscape ecology, that conventional that landscape ecology, you talk about the health of that different component, health that health of that soil, health of that flora and fauna. In the same way, when you bring the socio-ecological structure, then when you are trying to maintain that healthy of nature society interaction, you need to look into the social part of it from different angle, equity, equality, inclusiveness, and so on. Right? That is exactly what landscape sustainability science is talking about. Then coming to the resilience theory, as I told you, then we know that it is originally used in ecology as the capacity of a system to absorb external stressors or disturbance without changing its fundamental structure and function, or we can say shifting into a qualitative difference step. But if you look that is what we are talking about ecological system when we talk environment degradation. But after Rio 1992 means when the issues of sustainable development, that was 1987, that Grow Harlem that report on our common future, no, and that is the watershed in that this the watershed in the development of sustainable development concept. After the 1992, the United Nations efforts towards achieving sustainable development of the planet, the sustainable for a sustainable planet, and we look that we bring those things into the socio-ecological concept, right? So that's why the system itself, when there is collapse, that's why I told you we need to bring those that adaptive mechanism in this resilience theory of socio-ecological structure, right? Wherever you go, like when we talk about landscape ecology, also their heterogeneity is over there. In the same way, social structure has also heterogeneity. So that is what resilience theory is talking about, right? And coming to the hierarchy, hierarchy theory, that's the society also its own hierarchy. When we talk about socio-ecological system also, the way we talk about when we are studying at a different ecosystem, when we are studying I mean, as I told you, organism, or as we talk about the ecosystem, in the same way when we talk on the socio-ecological structure also, it has its own hierarchy. We need to understand those things in different way, in different scale, like from regional to local to regional to that global context. The basic issues in today's world is that our anthropogenic forces that is trying to disturb the harmonious relation of nature society interaction. As I told you, when we put that landscape ecology principle and the human as part of, if human is a part of landscape ecology, or interaction between nature society is, in other terms, socio-ecological interaction was in a smooth way. But in this contemporary world, then that has a negative impact, right? That's why how to adapt it. For example, see, in case of climate change, when it comes into climate change, what do we have to do? When changes happen, then what we have to learn? We have to understand adaptive mechanism, right? To bring our that what we say to that well-being of that our human well-being, right? It doesn't mean that okay, well, climate change is happening, nothing can possible. It's not. I mean, we must try in our best level to adapt in the changing environment. That is talking about adaptive mechanism. One of the example of say as I told you, we know that the basic problem with this nature society interaction is, our disturbance to the natural environment is because of to meet our basic needs. One is food. And if we properly plan our developmental pathways, then if we apply the principle of landscape ecology, then one of the some example, two most important approach is land sparing, land sharing. When it comes into land sparing, for example, land zoning strategy, what is happening nowadays when we are trying to develop that urbanization, when we are talking about special economic zone, when we are talking about a special agricultural zone. This is one of the example of land sparing. Then when we identify that kind of land sparing, then if we spare some part of the land for a specific purpose, for different purpose, then only we'll be able to manage properly, right? That is one of the principles you will see that also look from the lens of sustainable landscape ecology. The another is land sharing, that is coexistence of uh, different land use. For example, we can have in agricultural field or in a landscape, we can have different varieties of that crops where it have, I mean, it will have a co-benefit, mutual benefit to each other. So that will that is one of the, I mean, that is also one of the approach we can follow to implement this landscape ecology principle in new food production, uh, say an example of food production industry, right, in a landscape. This is some of the example. Here you will see how human well-being and that landscape and sustainability science and landscape ecology closely related. Ecosystem has a service. In here you will see we have a global system. Under that we have a socio-economic, socio-ecological system. Right. In that, if you look into sustainable landscape sustainability science, as I told you, it's landscape sustainability talks about what we talks about when human well-being out of ecosystem service means the relation has to be maintained between nature and society. But in case of landscape ecology, what we talk about, before we have understanding about landscape sustainability scientists about a basic the ecological processes, structure and function of landscape ecology. So this how it is related, you will find out over here, right? See, one example is how to understand this landscape ecology principle or landscape that ecological theory in implementing sustainable development goals. Let us take an example of when in most of the metros in the cities, we have shown that most of the wasteland or means wetlands, they are diminishing. When you are trying to revive or restore a wetlands, what kind of benefits are going to get it? It will recover ecosystem functioning service provision, right? That gives you, recreation, that's gives you good environment, good health. When you have a good environment, good health, and then you have a good forest ecosystem, and that indicate that reduced risks of infectious disease and the pest, and then that gives you better supply of food and clean air and water. For example, why in Delhi, why we are talking about the conservation of rich ecosystem? Because when we are properly conserve a rich ecosystem, forest ecosystem in Delhi, it absorbs the air pollution, right? When it absorbs the air pollution, or I mean, this is the and having a good environment that will give you good quality of air, that have a direct impact to the health of the human society, that is direct benefit to the human well-being. This is how we have to understand that landscape. This is a kind of hierarchy, principle of hierarchy of landscape ecology, how these functions are interrelated in terms of function. See, the another is example which another one is here you will see here how we can look that SDGs in the lens of landscape ecology. For example, when we talk about ending poverty or ending hunger or no poverty, that means a good environment in terms of ecology, natural resources, in terms of livelihood, in terms of good society, right? Then only you will have a good health and well-being. When you have a good health and well-being, only that can be possible when you have a good livelihood. That good livelihood or better livelihood you will get from another, it has another interconnection. Good quality of education. From where you will get a good quality of education, you will be able to give better quality of education when your livelihood is secure. How you will have a livelihood secure when you have a good health, right? When you have a good health, when you have livelihood security, then there will be no hunger, no poverty. The same way, and when uh, you have to maintain the good, environment means you need to have a good quality of air, good quality of water, and so on. So from here, you will be able to understand different component of the this is sub-engines that needs to be looked from the landscape ecology, that principle of landscape ecology, right? So that doesn't. What I want to say is that the different goals, it are interconnected like a landscape function and landscape structure. So all goals are interrelated to each other. Like for example, if you look those that possible inclusive development program or to look for sustainability, if you look into that from the policy perspective, here you will see all the department, for example in India or wherever in any other country, when we talk about a forest departments looks into the watershed management. For example, say an example in India, if you have a good forest, good health of the ecosystem, that forest, then your watershed will have a good health. When it have it, it will give a good livelihood to that people. Then you will have a good quality of water. There will be no siltation or minimum siltation. That good fisheries. In that way, when you have a good landscape in different area will have that growth in tourism. In the same way, then we can look all this the landscape. What I want to say is landscape ecology reflects the principle of landscape ecology reflects the interconnectedness of different issues and what people were talking about is disease sustainable development goals. We cannot look differently as isolation, right? That we cannot look in the sector level. We have to look from a holistic approach where our understanding, like the way landscape ecology we are understanding. Then why I bring ecological civilization over in this point? When we talk about ecological civilization, in the simplest term, it's a dynamic equilibrium state where humans, nature interact and function harmoniously. Is it a neutral term? Not exactly. In case of India, for example, our tradition and culture, we respect our natural environment. A simple example, if you look into any of the that civilization, it may be Harappan civilization, it may be then across the world, we can say every civilization has its own unique identity. In the same way, when they in that time they talk about the ecocentric view of that uh, civilization, how they manage or how they maintain with their environment. The point where I want to bring over here is that when we talk about the sustainability of the system or sustainability of the planet, we need to bring this concept of ecological civilization means coming back, we try to follow our lifestyle. First point, what I want to say is when we degrade the environment because of human advancement, human knowledge, we disturb and degrade the environment. We disturb resilience capacity of nature. Now we have to reaffirm, bring back. We must try to restore the system. So when we try to restore the system, we try to bring back the sustainability, harmonious relation with nature and society. We need to bring for a ecological civilization together. So this linking of this in to bring that we need to understand the linkage of what I talk about disturbance, resilience, and recovery of the system. This is what I want to share with all of you. These are few of the references which is very much important. I'm sharing this slide and you will be able to understand. You can explore more on this. Okay, thank you very much. And now I open for uh, this session for discussion.